Hey, it's Chris. Today we're checking out the iPhone 15 Pro lineup, and as I unbox this 15 Pro Max in black titanium, the plan is to actually share all kinds of information that I've dug up that you don't know yet about the Pro lineup. Things like the fact that the 15s are basically gaming consoles, the fact that Apple now lets you display the charge cycles, how many times you've charged your iPhone, as well as why the telephoto on the 15 Pro Max is limited to 5 times optical zoom instead of something like 10 or 20. Well, that has to do with stabilization, and also it takes better low light photos. So today, not only am I gonna give you my reaction to this black titanium model here, but you're also gonna find out all kinds of interesting details that you would have otherwise missed. Already this close to launch, we can already tell that demand for the 15 Pro Max model is already outstripping supply. So here's my first look at the black iPhone 15 Pro, and this matte glass finish on the back here, that looks really nice. In fact, it looks better in person than I would have thought just looking at the pictures. And as you're checking this out, I know that it's already gonna be tempting for people to think there's really nothing different in terms of looks versus the 14 Pro, but actually the average person upgrades their iPhone every 3.3 years. So a good chunk of the people who are checking out this year's Pros are actually gonna be coming from the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. And when you factor that in, then the changes seem a bit less subtle. But I get it when people are like, nothing's really new here. I have to say though, one thing I'm hearing a lot about is how the dynamic range has really improved on the 15 Pro Max versus the 14 Pro Max. Now in the US, you can trade an iPhone 14 Pro Max for up to $650 from Apple. Now, you'll notice there's a new cable here in the box. And yes, it's USB-C, we'll talk about that in a second. It's woven, and part of the deal with that is that it shouldn't be so easy to tangle, number one. It shouldn't fray as easily either, number two. But unfortunately, this particular cable that comes included in the box is only gonna have USB 2 speeds, which is kind of unfortunate because when somebody buys the Pros, what they're really buying, I feel like, is a camera that also does phone things. And if you're really going out and making the best use of the camera here, then that creates huge files, especially video files. And the ability to transfer those off quickly is definitely gonna come with a higher price tag because you're gonna have to upgrade your cord. One thing that's kind of cool though is that now that we have USB-C, you can actually use it as a power bank to charge another phone. So if, let's say my wife got the new iPhone and I got the new iPhone and I had more battery than she did, when we hook those up, mine's gonna actually transfer some of the power to hers. And then you can also use the USB-C here to charge up something like the new AirPods Pro case, which is also USB-C. By the way, unboxing this new iPhone here, feeling all of the untapped potential reminds me of a big announcement. Today, for the first time ever, I'm putting my courses on sale for 50% off. It's gonna last for 1 week. If you wanna learn how to be more productive in the Apple ecosystem, check out the courses. They're linked up down below. Don't let the opportunity slip by because a sale this big is never gonna happen again. Now, one thing about this titanium build is that it's lighter and you can just feel it. This doesn't feel like a Pro from years past because I'm used to the Pros being heavier. So I really appreciate this lighter weight, especially if you jump on the Pro Max bandwagon. The new Max is like 10% lighter than the 14 Pro Max. For those of you that care, and I know that's not everybody, yeah, you can see fingerprints on here. I think with this black titanium model though, it's definitely gonna be probably more subtle than on one of the lighter colors. And I gotta tell you, people keep posting online about how much smaller the bezels are this year. And I don't know if it's just me, but when I look at the photos online, I can't really tell a noticeable difference. I feel like people are sort of overdoing it in that department. I mean, even here, I really don't notice it all that much. I mean, I just don't. But before we dive into the new features, we do have to talk about this glass back here because this new design is actually gonna be quite a bit cheaper to repair than the 14 Pros. And if that self-repair, the repairability issue was something that you were really interested in, that's definitely different. So as you're setting this up, you actually get a screen right off the bat explaining about the new action button and letting you customize it. And it takes you right into this new settings screen, which everyone is talking about how un-Apple-like it feels. And by default, it's set up to work just like the mute switch on your 14 Pros. Of course, that's not how I plan on using it. I'm probably gonna get this set up with some shortcuts because that's where all the power is. And then of course, there's a new screen to talk about emergency SOS. Now, one thing that's good about unboxing this particular Pro and not the Max is that we can talk a little bit about the positioning of the action button here. I know a lot of people are already complaining about how hard it is for them to reach the action button on the Max model, but here it's very reachable, super easy to get to. In fact, it falls just where my thumb would be anyways when I'm gripping this normally. So if you get the Pro model, in the settings here, there's a new action button area. That's what brings you to this new screen. And I just wanna point out something I know a lot of people aren't gonna realize. You can program the action button not only to launch the camera, which would really be no different than the on-screen shortcut we've all had on our iPhones for years anyways, but here you can actually select the exact camera you wanna pop up, whether it's the portrait selfie, the video camera, or just the front-facing selfie camera. Now the big story with the Pros is always the camera, but of course it does have a new processor. And what you hear people saying every year is, well, the best camera that you have is the one that's always with you, which would of course be your phone. But people are starting to say the same thing about this as a gaming console. What's the best gaming console? Well, the gaming console that you have with you at all times. For a lot of people I know, they're looking at the processor, seeing the gaming capabilities, and they're like, well, that's what makes it worth it for me. Finally, the processor jump actually does something that you care about. Well, for me, I'm trying to play less video games in my life, so that doesn't really apply. But I will point out, thanks to the USB-C now, you can hook this into an external monitor and use it basically like an actual gaming console. Now, one interesting aspect of this that I think a lot of people are gonna pass over is the Thread support, the Thread capabilities. Thread, if you don't know, is a smart home protocol. It's like a self-healing mesh network, and it just makes your devices on your home network work together a little bit smoother. And what the Thread support for the Pros actually does is it makes connecting to your home network devices faster and easier, but also you can connect to things that are further away. Now I know a lot of people are just gonna jump into the cameras and we're gonna get there in a second, but I do wanna point out one other interesting detail that probably is gonna get glossed over by a lot of people, and that is the voice isolation feature. If you're calling someone and there's background noise, you can turn on the voice isolation, which isn't gonna make your call sound better, but it's gonna cut out annoying background sounds. One more thing I wanna note about the design before we move on is the new rounded nature of the edges here. These phones definitely feel different when you grip them than the previous Pros with those hard edges, but they're not so curved that they can't stand up on their own, so you can use it as a tripod if you need to in a pinch. Certainly not the biggest deal in the world, especially because a lot of people are just gonna slap a case on, but I do prefer it to how things were. When you launch the camera app for the first time, you're gonna get this notification that tells you about portraits and photo mode. Whenever a person or dog or cat is in the frame, you can quickly turn the photo into a portrait, which you can then edit later. You don't have to think too much about it in the moment. The cool thing about that is that all you have to worry about when you go to take a photo is framing it up right. Now, even though this isn't the Max, so it doesn't have that 5x optical zoom that's only on the Max, I do wanna mention I've seen a lot of people online talking about the fact that the digital zoom, which goes up to 25x, is actually surprisingly usable. Now, even though this isn't the Pro Max, when I tap on that 1x button, I still get 24, 28, and 35 options off of that main lens. Now on this regular Pro here in the camera settings, I can't do cinematic in 4K 60, but I can go into the camera settings and enable Pro RAW resolution control, and I can say Pro default, either Pro RAW Max or Pro RAW 12 megapixel or the new HEIF Max format. Then actually once those are enabled, I can long press on that setting up here in the top right corner and enable any of those options. Now here's what's cool about HEIF if you don't know. HEIF, and I'm just going with Apple's pronunciation there from the event, is sort of like a JPEG in that it compresses your image so that it doesn't take up so much space on your phone, but it uses about 50% less storage than a JPEG. And pretty incredibly, that actually includes both the live photo and portrait data. So wow. Now again, this isn't the Max, but I do want to point something out about that 5x optical zoom that the Max has. Because of the Pro Max's bigger sensor and better stabilization, you're actually gonna end up with better natural background separation, a better actual natural blur without using any kind of portrait mode or computational trickery, just by using that 5x optical zoom. Now Apple did actually go ahead and send me this fine woven case as well. And this actually is the material that Apple is using to replace leather, which personally I would have rather had the leather, even if this turns out to be novel or interesting in some way. So hopefully you can see some of that texture there. It just feels very fabric-like to me. I mean, it's interesting. I'm not sure how it's gonna hold up over time. I guess we'll see. And as I open up this fine woven wallet here, I'll just say anybody who was into the leather, in my opinion, isn't gonna be like, oh yeah, this is way cooler than the leather. I mean, people get the leather for a reason. They like the way that it wears over time, the way that it feels, the premium quality to it. And this, I believe, is the black fine woven wallet. So there it is, that's what it looks like. And actually it feels pretty substantial. And that's how the black fine woven actually fits, how it looks on the black titanium iPhone Pro. So there you go, there's the new iPhone 15 Pro. Hopefully you learned a few things here. Of course, get yourself subscribed. Don't forget to check out the courses. For 1 week only, we're having a 50% off sale, mostly to celebrate the launch of the new course. It was a lot of work, but it was super worth it because the things I share in there are just life-changing, honestly. But it's both courses. The productivity course, Learning to be Productive, which will help you get more done in less time within the Apple ecosystem with less burnout. That's sort of the flagship course, which isn't done, by the way. I'm always going to be leaving room to add applicable updates as I have time and as they're relevant. I've got some great ones planned. Apple Watch Ultra 2 review unit is in the mail, should be here tomorrow, so stick around for that. Oh, and last thing, don't forget to follow me over on x.com/dailytech, daily TEKK, or twitter.com. It goes to the same place. I'm getting a ton of engagement over there. That platform is really taking off, and I gotta go where the engagement is. So it's linked up down below, so is the newsletter. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.